Hey, what is up guys, I'm Xteria, and in this video we're going to cover the Fast 9 win game comp, Silco. In order to play this comp, we have to win streak in the early game, so we can save as much HP as we can to hit Fast 9. On top of that, we need a lot of econ, so we can get our legendary units level 2 as quick as we can. For our carry, the main unit I want to atomize is Silco, and his core items that have a Spear of Shojin. This item will give him the max amount of cast, and the reason why you need as much cast as you can is because, for those that don't know how Dominator works, this trait allows you to gain more AP for every time you cast, and Shojin will give him the max amount of cast compared to the other items like Adaptive Helm or even Blue Buff. The best item that can make him cast super quickly would be Mana Zane, but it's an artifact item, so if you can get this item, it's really good to have, but you still need Shojin either way because it's his core item, so having a Shojin plus anything that can help him cast more or even faster, like Nashers, Adaptive, or even Mana Zane is really good. Or you can use double Shojin as well, is also fine. And you need amplification items such as Jewel Gauntlet or even Stride Breaker or a Death Cap. Archangel Staff is okay as well, but it's not the best on him. The reason why it is a decent flex item is because you put it on Lux early game, and Lux is very powerful with Archangel Staff, so you can win streak early with it, and it's not too bad to transfer it to Silco into the late game. And you get other artifacts that's also really powerful on him, which is Blight and Jeweled, because he has a lot of grubs, and for each damage they do, it will reduce magic resist by a lot. And DFG is a pretty decent one because it gives you a lot of AP. Same with Zonias, it's not a bad artifact on Silco. For a secondary carry, most of the time it's going to be a Mordekaiser, and since you can be playing him at level 1 for a majority of the game, his core items that have an Edge of Night so he doesn't die as easy, and a lot of people view him as a one-shot character, but in reality, you kind of want him to have a lot of attack speed. So other items such as Nashers 2 and Quicksilver will allow him to keep smacking units, and since he's a Dominator, most of the time you're going to have 4 or more, he's going to be doing a lot of damage with that AP anyways, so you just want to keep smacking. And the thing about Mordekaiser that most people don't know as well is his ability already has inbuilt Omnivamp, therefore he gains lifesteal anyways from his ability. Good other items you can flex around would be like Guard Breaker, since his item is pretty decent with damage, and on top of that, it also gives you some attack speed. You can do lifesteal items if you cannot build Quicksilver or even Edge of Night like Hodge or even Bloodthirster, or last resort item, Crown Guard is also really good on Mordekaiser as well. The best artifacts to take hands down would be any range one, such as Rapid Fire, Fish and Bones, and Sniper's Focus. This will allow him to not die as easy, and his ability can hit basically the whole board. Or if you want AP items such as Seeker's Arm Guard and Zonias, these two are really good as well. And for our tanks, it could be either Garen, Mundo, or even Elise. Whichever one you hit level 2 first is kind of you want to atomize. These are technically best in slot tank items, but I would prefer just having either a Warmongs and a Sunfire, because this allows you to have some sort of HP, and it also gives you debuffs. Speaking of debuffs, Onyx Spark is really good as well, because you need that Magic Resist Shred. Onyx Spark would probably be the best, or even Static Shiv on a Cassiopeia. The best emblems to choose from is either Dominator or even Black Rose. And for those that don't know, if you reforge a pan, you can turn it into a spat and just make it into the spat item that you want. The best first item slimes you can make would be a Spirit Shojin or even Nashers, because you get that cast right away, and is very powerful on our openers as well. Speaking of which, Archangel Staff is really good on Lux. If you cannot build Shojin first, you can build Archangel Staff on her so you can keep win streaking. Another good alternative item would be like Static Shiv, because you're playing mostly a magic board anyways, so this will allow you to do extra damage since it will shred all the magic resist away from the enemies. Or you can build decent tank items such as Sunfire, because you get a lot of damage from this item and it's pretty decent tank item. If you get 2 builds, just make a Warmongs, and it's probably the best tank item at the moment, so it's always good to have. Adaptive Helm, you can use it either as a tank item or as a backline item. It just depends which one you hit level 2 first. And if you cannot build any decent item, Onyx Spark is pretty decent as a tank item as well, because it's the same thing as Static Shiv. It just magically just shreds the board, and you can get a lot of value from this item. A good thing to note here is don't build both Static Shiv and Onyx Spark on the same board, because they both do the exact same thing, so it's just good to have one or the other. They also buff Onyx Spark this patch, so it's really worth it to build if you really want to. The thing I mentioned earlier, our best opener would be to have a Lux 2 with Spirit Shojin or something, and it's going to indicate for our Silco item. And for our tanks, it would be the Mumu or Darius, which whatever one you get level 2 first, you put the tank items on them. And Mormonks is going to be a good indicator for tank. To pair up the Lux for Sorks, you have a Zyra, or you can throw in a Vladimir. And whichever one you hit level 2 first, just take out the level 1 tank unit for a Vladimir instead. So if you don't have level 2 Mumu, just throw in Vlad. Or if you don't have level 2 Darius, throw in Vlad. Over time, just throw in Black Rose units or even Sork units to keep win streaking. For our budget version, because we're going to need a lot of 5-cost units, for this style of board, is to have these units without Mordekaiser, but the base board is to have Mordekaiser over the Blitzcrank. And also the LeBlanc over Morgana, because LeBlanc's a better unit, and you also get the Mage trait or Sork trait with Vladimir, so you get some pretty good synergies there. And at level 9, we just throw in the Jace. For our Dominator, style, we're gonna have a LeBlanc with the Dominator emblem, and we throw in our 6 Dominator at level 9, either Ziggs or Blitzcrank. I prefer Blitzcrank personally because you have extra frontline. For our Black Rose style, you just have basically 4 Dominators instead of 6 because Dominator with emblem, you can have 6. You have 7 Black Rose with any unit that can hold the item, like Garen is also fine with the Black Rose emblem, just whatever unit that can hold it. And that's basically about it for at least the base knowledge of how to play this comp. Now for the team builder segment, so I can talk about this comp more in depth and in detail, the best opener hands down would be to have a Lux 2, and her best item would be to have a Shojin, or even an Archangel Staff. These two are very powerful on her, but I'm gonna represent Silco items as Shojin for now. And the best tank to pair up with her would be to have an Amumu, since he is probably one of the best early game tanks, and we can represent that with Warmongs. Another good item you can slam would be like Sunfire, so either one's fine, or even an Onyx Spark because you need that magic resist shred. This is pretty decent as well. Speaking of that, you can do Static Shiv as well if you want on Lux. It's just whatever components you have at the time. And to have the best traits you can have on this board would be to have a Darius for the Watcher, or even having Zyra for that Sork. So this is the board I generally play most of the time, so I could keep win streaking with if I could upgrade all of them, but sometimes maybe you cannot find upgrades. So therefore, maybe you might find a Vlad instead, whichever you have one level 2 first, a Mumu or Darius, you transfer the item to either one, just take out the other Watcher unit and just have Vlad in. And at this point, we have 3 Sork and 2 Watcher, so when we hit level 5, you can throw in Anomalies, so you can have that 4 Sork or whatever Sork you can find. Unless you want to play for the Black Rose style, you can have maybe a Morgana too, that's fine as well. And then you high roll a Cassiopeia at level 6, so you can have that Scion. So this is like the base way of how I play this opener, but there is different opener that you can do, which is having the Vex style, and that would be to have the case of having a Vex 2 as the item holder instead over the Lux, and then our main tank here is going to be Sentinels instead. So we're going to have, for example, like an Aurelia, and you just transfer the tank item to Aurelia because she is a really strong and powerful tank. And another good Sentinel could be either Singe, or even like the Vladimir thing, you can have Rel because it gives you both Visionary and Sentinels, so over time you can throw in either Rebel units like either Set or even a Kali. I prefer having a Set because when you hit level 5 you can throw in a Bruiser like maybe even a Trundle or a Nunu. It's just whatever you can find over time. Even a Rennie 1 is also really good, so either one is fine. If you cannot have a Rel, like for example maybe you might have a Singe instead, then you can just throw in a Morgana 2 and then take out the Rennie, because to level 5 you can probably transition into the Black Rose. So when you hit level 6, maybe you throw in, for example, Vladimir, and by then you can maybe think about probably having a Black Rose unit. So you can throw in Black Rose over Set. Yes, it will take away the Rebel, but the Scion is kind of more worth it in my opinion. And then from here, you hit level 8 at 4-2, just roll down to hit your Silco board. Other openers I can briefly say would be like a Morgana carry instead. So you want like Black Rose with these 2 units, and then instead of these as your tanks, you have, for example, like an Amumu is fine, because sometimes you might get a Cassiopeia drop and you can do this as your opener as well, or you can even do a Ziggs opener where you can have Ziggs and hopefully you find a Cassiopeia later down the line, because maybe you might have this board instead, which is okay, or you do Bruiser opener with it because you get scrapped with Ziggs, so you can do this as well with a Steb, so you can have that Bruiser, and then maybe over time you look for other decent unit, because Morgana 2 is actually pretty decent by herself as well, and maybe you might be able to find Cassiopeia hopefully, and a Vladimir, and this could be a really decent board at level 6 as well. So this is like similar to the Vex style with like the 2 Sentinels, instead it's 2 Bruisers instead with Ziggs carry. So it's just whatever you can find with Black Rose, just combine them and you'll be pretty decent to not lose a lot of HP, or maybe even 10 streak all the way to wolves. It's just whatever resources you have available to save as much HP as you can. Now then, for your 4-2 roll down, the main units you want to look for is having a Silco, because he's going to be your main carry. If you cannot have Silco 2 or even Silco 1, Ziggs 2 is decent as well. Like until you find the Silco 2, you can keep having Ziggs 2, but for now, we're going to show it as Silco instead, so we can take out the Ziggs and we have Cassiopeia. Hopefully by then you have some sort of magic resist shred like Static Shiv on her. Cassiopeia Static Shiv is very powerful, and to play the budget version is going to be Mundo as probably our main tank, hopefully. If not, it could be Elise as the main tank, or maybe even a Garen as a main tank, because whichever one you hit level 2 first is you want to put the items on. But most of the time I do like Garen personally as the main tank, and the positioning I like to do is somewhere around this, because I like Scion to be on the same side of Silco just in case, so he can knock them up. And on top of that, he has an extra pretty decent tank in front of him. And since we want to play 4 Dominator majority of the time, I would like to have a Blitzcrank for extra tank. And the positioning I like to do is like something like this or like this is fine. If you want to do the other side, it'll look something like this. As long as you have more like frontline on the side of Silco so you can survive longer, it's good enough. And then to play the full board is instead of having Morgana, you have LeBlanc. And instead of having a Blitzcrank, you have a Mordekaiser. And you kind of want Mordekaiser with the Garen because you want the extra health on him. Unless you have, for example, items like artifacts that gives him range, for example, then you want to put him in the back line. And then this kind of positioning would be fine. But most of the time you can't play that item, so I would prefer just to do like this kind of positioning or like the same side with Silco so he doesn't die as easy. That's the reason why most of the time with your item components, hopefully you can hold out an Edge of Night. Don't slam this right away at level 8 because if you don't hit a Mordekaiser, you have Edge of Night. It's kind of useless to keep. So it's better to have like better tank item components or something. Unless you have to slam the Edge of Night, then it's fine. Just make it for Mordekaiser. Or you could throw it on like Garen or even like Cassiopeia if you have to hold out to give it to Mordekaiser is fine. But most of the time I don't slam it unless I find a unit. If not, I just use these components for different items. And the reason why I don't play 6 Dominator from this angle is because if you have this board, for example, like having a Zig instead of LeBlanc, instead of having Garen, we have a Blitzcrank. This could be pretty decent, but then the issue is your synergy is just 6 Dominator and 3 Black Rose. Most of the time it is not tanky enough for you to win rounds. If you can make this work, good on you. I would just say most of the time in hard elo, this is not going to be working well. So that's the reason why I prefer to have the Garen and the LeBlanc in to make that sound a little bit tankier. And you also get the AP synergy with Sork because of LeBlanc and Vladimir. So it gives more AP to like the other AP units is pretty decent. But if you do want to play 6 Dominator, the best way to do it is to have an emblem. So you just put on a LeBlanc and then at level 9, you start a Blitzcrank to have that 6 Dominator. But if you cannot get the emblem, it's fine. You could just throw out another legendary unit like Jace, I would prefer, because that crystal will give more attack speed to Silco. And maybe it might be able to reach Mordekaiser hopefully somehow. But most of the time we'll be hitting LeBlanc, Jace, and Silco. If you want to play the Black Rose style, then you just get the Morgana. And hopefully you have a Black Rose spat, because this will allow you to have an even stronger Scion. So hopefully you get 2 of them, like one with Garen and maybe one on Mundo. Or if you don't have space on Mordekaiser is fine. It's just whatever you have space on, you just throw it on him. And you have 7 Black Rose to make the Scion like a bit tanky, and he will just kill everything. Unless you only have 1 Black Rose emblem, then you could just take away the Morgana, and you have 5 here. Just keep the Jason, or whatever other legendary unit you can find. Maybe, hopefully, a Victor, or even a Mel. It's just whatever you can get over time. And there is one more style that I didn't show in the charts because it requires a lot of money, and it requires a lot of skill to do, which is full legendary, and that is to have the Rumble over the Mundo, and to have better units over time in, you can have a Rel in because it gives you Sentinels with the Rumble and Rel, and then you just take out the Cassiopeia because you're only going to play 2 Dominator from this angle to play more legendary units in, and you can either have like a Jace, so you can have that Form Stopper Valise, or you could throw in even like a Victor or like a Mel. So this is a pretty decent idea too for like full on legendary. If you want to drop the 2 Dominator instead of 4, you can do that as well. Essentially, you could just mix and match with Black Rose and you're pretty good to go. Just have an open mind on what you can play and what you can't play. The best augments you always want to click and take would be to have any of the artifact items, because artifacts is really powerful for this board. And a really good one for Silco and Mordekaiser would be Blazing Soul, because this augment allows you to get attack speed and AP for your units. The augment priority you want to do most of the time is Econ first. So you have Prize Fighter, which is technically both Econ and item, or a decent Econ augment would be Raining Gold or even Slammin. I did have a game where I was playing with Slammin and Prize Fighter as my augments, and yes, they are counterintuitive to one another, since Prize Fighter keeps giving you items for every 5 wins, and Slammin, in order to gain XP, you have to slam your items on the board. So if you want to see that gameplay, you can check it out on my other channel in the description below. And a pretty good, technically another Econ augment would be Epoch, or Epoch, whatever you want to pronounce it, since it gives you XP and 2 free rerolls. Good combat augment would be like Domination, or even Dominator Crest. I will categorize this as the combat augment because you have 6 Dominator. Item Collector is pretty decent since you have a lot of items over time. Or Coronation, it technically counts as a combat and an item augment, since you get +1 really powerful item, and you can get +1 unit on the board. And Mana Flow Ban is just really good on Silco overall. The units you want the Anomalies on is most of the time will be Silco, and his best one would be Nothing Wasted. The Anomaly will allow you to get almost like top 2 or top 3, because if you have a unit that dies, it'll transfer all the mana into Silco, so you can keep doing a lot of damage. Speaking of mana, kill streak is pretty decent, because if Silco kills a unit, then he gains some mana back, and he can keep casting even more. Speaking of casting, Magic Expert, for more you cast, the more AP you get for your board. So it's really good on Silco overall. Essentially, is anything that involves mana or AP is what you need on Silco. And then for your tanks, it could be any of them like Garen, Elise, or Mundo. These ones are the best tank ones. Giant Size gives you a lot of HP. Stone Skin gives you a lot of resistances. Same thing with Bulwark, gives you a lot of resistances. It's just whatever gives you good tank stats is the ones you want to take for any of these tank units for their anomalies. And that's it for the Fast 9 win game comp Silco. If you have any questions, or if you don't understand anything that I explained in this video, just ask in the comment section down below and I'll try to answer to the best of my capabilities as fast as I can. Or you can check out my stream on Twitch. I might be playing TFT at the time, or Marvel Rivals, depending on what it is. Until then, I'll see you guys on the next one. Later.